I see they're talking about using it as a substitute or replacing coal-fired power stations potentially. Is that like, that sort of rings the hydrogen hype as well? But
so basically that is something which is actually mandated by the Japanese and Korean governments. Japan has a relatively young coal-fired power station fleet. Quite a lot of it was built after, the tsunami, and they're quite reliant. I mean, 30% of Japanese power is still produced by coal. And actually, one of the interesting things that you've seen in the, since the outbreak of conflict in the Middle East is that they've actually shifted to even greater percentage of coal-fired power generation. And what ammonia does, you don't really have to re-engineer your thermal power station very much. You essentially change some of the nozzles for the burners, and you can actually use ammonia as a blend in with the coal, and you have an immediate impact on reducing the CO2 emissions.
This is general advice and my opinions only. This episode's company has paid me for this interview. I may be long, short, or hold an interest in stocks or CFDs mentioned. Past performance isn't reliable. The interviewee's views are their own, not necessarily mine. LEVRD operates as a corporate authorised representative 00131 8377 under AFSL 548573. You can find our financial services guide via the LEVRD website, link in the show notes.
And stop loss owners, I'm heading into, again, uncharted waters, pardon the pun, of things that might have been impacted by this Iran Middle Eastern war, and the words of ammonia, fertiliser keep coming up. So, and one of the local players in this is NH3 Clean Energy, and I've got the chairman, Charles Whitfield, on. Welcome to LEVRD, mate. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much, Matty. Pleasure to be here.
You've got, and the interesting part about you, mate, is we're into ammonia and clean energy at the moment, but if you can take it on the same journey as you did with Galaxy, which got merged about 17 times to become Arcadium, this is a bit of a different kettle of fish for you.
Well, it sort of is and it sort of isn't. I mean, that was a very small company that we managed to get the financing sorted out and take it on to greater things. Also sort of energy transition. So similar thematic.
Yeah, very good, mate. Now, okay, there's going to be a lot of 101 here. You've got an Australian-based project up in the Pilbara. We're talking ammonia, not for just fertiliser. We're talking for ship energy, like ammonia bunkering, using this to hopefully transport iron ore over to Asia. I didn't even know that ammonia was possibly going to be a clean energy application. So let's start with the 101 about the product. We'll get into the market, the impacts of the war, and what your project is and where it's actually starting. So ammonia, everyone references fertiliser, but it's bit beyond that. I used to use it in explosives for ammonium nitrate. So, mate, give us a bit of 101 of which part of the industry that you're having a tickle at.
Absolutely. I saw your video the other day about helium, and the lady you had on had a PhD. I don't have a PhD, but I'll do the best I can.
Oh, we'll shut it off now, mate.
Exactly. So ammonia is NH3, which is why the company is called NH3. If you think about natural gas, that's CH4. So the magic thing in all of these molecules is the H. That's where the power comes from. The difference with ammonia is when you burn it, you haven't got any carbon in it to create carbon dioxide. So that's one of the reasons why it can be a fuel and lower emissions, and that's why people are looking at it for replacing heavy fuel oil and marine diesel in shipping, and also displacing coal in thermal power stations, especially in Japan and Korea.
Yeah, right. So, okay, and why marine fuel specifically? Like, is this, I know that's been tied to hydrogen a bit. We obviously went through the hydrogen hype, which sort of dropped off a bit. Like, how is ammonia different as a fuel?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So, I mean, the challenge with hydrogen is it's literally, the smallest atom, and so it's very hard to store, it's very hard to transport. It has a very low energy density. So when you actually want to use it as a fuel, unless you're literally using it next door to where you're producing it, it can be quite challenging. So ammonia is a much better solution. It's much easier to handle. And so if you're looking at shipping, you obviously need something which can travel a long distance. And so, by using ammonia, you can actually do large intercontinental routes and use ammonia as a fuel, whereas it would be practically impossible to use hydrogen for that length of travel, just because it's got such low energy density.
Okay, so ammonia, like compared to, it's obviously going to be cleaner than diesel, but the thing is, you're saying that you can have so much of it on board to use as a fuel for such long distances and long time. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it has you need twice as much storage as you have for diesel, but you don't have 10 times as much like you would have for hydrogen.
Okay, gotcha. Now the different, when we're talking clean ammonia, like from what I've seen, there's different levels of it. I'll read this. You've got grey ammonia, blue ammonia, green ammonia, clean ammonia. What are the differences? And I guess what's NH3 proposing?
Yeah, it's interesting how, especially in Australia, everybody talks about green or blue or whatever. And in the industry, everybody just talks about emissions intensity. So grey is basically using a hydrocarbon to produce your ammonia, so that might be gas or coal, and all of the CO2 which is produced while you're making the ammonia, or specifically making the hydrogen to go into the ammonia, is just dissipated to the atmosphere. And so there's no benefit in terms of lowering emissions that way. With blue ammonia, you're using gas as your feedstock for the ammonia, but you're capturing about 98% of the processed CO2. And so it actually has a very low carbon profile, and that's why it's a clean fuel. With green, you don't start with gas, you start with water. So instead of splitting CH4 and taking off the hydrogen, you start with H2O and split off the hydrogen. The issue with that is it takes a huge amount of energy. The aspiration, the hope down the track is that you'll be able to use renewable energy, but at the moment it's cost prohibitive. It's kind of a nascent technology, which just is very hard to commercialize at the moment.
Yeah, okay. So before we get on to fertiliser, so in terms of the fuel side, I saw an article recently where there was some, correct me if I'm wrong, successful ammonia bunkering, like transfer of ammonia as into a ship. It was in South Korea, was it?
Yeah, actually, there have been a number of those ship-to-ship bunkering transfers done already. One actually in the Pilbara at Dampier, where we are. That was the first. There's also been ones in Singapore, in Rotterdam, one in the Middle East, in Oman, and as you say, the latest one was in South Korea.
And so bunkering, that means that's just transferring the ammonia from the port into the ship to use as the fuel?
Yeah, it's basically just ship-to-ship refueling.
Okay, and was there, so has there been sort of historically, like, was there safety concerns about how to appropriately do that? Was that like a bit of a bottleneck on this whole process?
Not really, because ammonia has been around for 100 years as an industrial product and shipped around the world for that length of time as well. Usually it's done from a wharf to a ship. So doing ship to ship, you need to have, make sure that there's a protocol for doing it. And that's one thing which the industry is very focused on at the moment, is making sure that there's an international standard in terms of how that refueling takes place.
And so is there any actual applications at the moment on a large level where ammonia is being used as a fuel source for marine?
Yeah. There are ammonia-powered fuel vessels. Actually, two more just got launched last week. There are ammonia-powered, and they tend to be dual-fueled. They can use diesel or ammonia, but there are vessels on the water already. Yeah,
okay. So, and I got this graph up from your deck here, sort of looking at the future, and when we talk about bunkering, so when like talking about bunkering demand, is that referring
Yeah,
to
why don't you
using
go on to the next slide that
Yep.
talks. So this one's looking at the cogen. This one's looking at bunkering, and we've been around long enough to see hockey stick growth and predictions of great things in the future and all the rest of it, and you can be rightly cynical. What this chart shows, that blue, orange, and grey stack. So that actually shows ships which are either under construction or ordered in each of the categories between bulkers, container ships, and auto carriers. So we've got a high degree of confidence in terms of what the demand looks like, because these ships are actually being built, and those different years of the delivery date. So we know from that year what the demand is going to be.
Yeah, okay, so you can sort of model it a bit like a nuclear reactor build out. You know what's being built and you know the uranium it's going to need. This is...
Exactly.
So, and this is... I'm sticking on the ships at the moment because this is fascinating. So we're talking about, is there potentially going to be, and which ships are being included here, like your ships taking Rio, BHP, FMG's iron ore over to Asia. Is that going to be part of the mix that's where ammonia could be used as a marine fuel source?
Absolutely. I mean, it makes total sense, because one of the great things about that route, so the Iron Corridor, first of all, it's the busiest shipping route in the world by tonnage. So it's a huge market. Secondly, it is a point-to-point route. So you're going basically from the Pilbara to a port in Asia and back again, or to China or to Japan or to Korea and back again. So what you can do is have a ship which can refuel every single time at the Pilbara and then do there and back on one refueling. And that is ideal for a new fuel like ammonia, as opposed to a ship that might, start in Japan and then go to China and then go to, Saudi and then go to Europe and whatever else, at which point you need refueling stops all the way along. So it's the perfect place. It's sort of the low-hanging fruit of energy conversion.
Okay, and is it cheaper, like compared to diesel? Like, is ammonia going to be fuel source going to be a cheaper alternative or just a cleaner alternative?
It's a cleaner alternative. It is more expensive, but the IMO, which is the International Maritime Organization, which is part of the UN, actually they just had another meeting last week for what they call the net zero framework, which basically has a stick and carrot for ship operators, which would basically equalize the price between using heavy fuel oil and ammonia.
Yeah, okay. And would the price of it, would it ever become cheaper, like if scale and use increases, or it's probably not?
To be brutally honest, it's hard to see that, because at the end of the day, I mean, it depends on the relative price of gas and oil, I guess, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So if gas becomes more and more plentiful versus oil, it could get relatively cheap. But, obviously oil has relatively little processing involved in it.
Yeah, okay. And now onto the fertiliser side, because I've seen a lot of with the supply chain disruption, you'd say, at the moment, with the Strait closure, fertilisers come into question, because you've got ammonia, you've got fertiliser, and they talk about urea as well, like how the farmers are being impacted. Can you explain the difference of how ammonia is used for those products?
Yeah, absolutely. So urea is basically ammonia with a CO stuck on the end of it. So carbon and an oxygen stuck on the end of it. So you start with ammonia, and then you further process it into urea, and that changes it into solid form, which is obviously easy to use as a fertilizer. So that's really what the difference is between the two. More than 75% of ammonia is ultimately used in fertilizer at the moment. So it's a huge component of the market.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, as the energy market grows out, I mean, it was the same with lithium. When we took on Galaxy, most lithium was used in lubricants and pharmaceuticals. I mean, everybody used to say, lithium, isn't that something you give your granny when she has a bit of a turn or whatever? And nobody knew about the battery market. And now, of course, the battery market is like 90% of the lithium demand. So, these things change over time.
Yeah, okay. So, and when So where's most of the? Why has this been disrupted so much? Like out of that 75% that's used for fertiliser, is a lot of it coming from the Middle East?
It is. I mean, there are two things. First of all, quite a lot of ammonia and urea comes from the Middle East. Secondly, obviously, a lot of the LNG, which other people use as their feedstock for ammonia, comes out of the Middle East as well. So there's been a massive disruption from both of those sides of the supply chain.
Okay, so I guess can you compare it to nickel in a way? Like 70% of nickel's used for stainless steel. So in terms of ammonia, 3/4 is used for fertiliser, but this marine fuel is potentially the growing part of the industry, or one of.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, the CAGR for ammonia with the energy applications built in, it's like a 30% CAGR till 2050. It's enormous growth if if the adoption goes at the speed that they're predicting.
Yeah. Okay. So can you explain the Australian ammonia industry to me? Like, who are the players? What is already established for ammonia? Like, are they sourcing local gas for it? Just a bit of an overview.
Yeah, for sure. So there are 3 producers in Australia at the moment, which is basically Yarra, Wesfarmers, and Orica. Obviously, Yarra is actually very close to where we are, up near the Port of Dampier. And in fact, one of the reasons why our location is so great is because we're using a lot of common infrastructure between them and ourselves. So there's them. Wesfarmers are obviously taking gas out of the Perth Basin, and then Orica are over on the East Coast.
Oh, okay, yeah.
In total production for Australia, it's about 1.5 million tonnes to 2 million tonnes in that region at the moment. But it's all grey ammonia, and all those plants are quite old. The youngest of them is 20 years old, and a typical life of operation is 25 years before you need a lot of retrofitting. One of them was actually built in the 60s. So the other thing is that they're all grey ammonia plants, and obviously with the safeguard mechanism coming in, the emissions that they're allowed to do without having to buy ACCUs, lowers by 4.9% per year. So it's going to become increasingly expensive for those guys to operate.
Okay, so that 1.5 million tonnes a year, what's that globally? Like, how small are we as a player?
We're not big in terms of the global market. I mean, what's interesting, so China, Russia, India, and the USA are the biggest producers, but the top 3 of those are actually still net importers of ammonia. So in terms of exporters, the biggest countries are Saudi and Canada and Indonesia.
Yeah, okay. So, and then everything, so the stuff, the Wesfarmers and, what was the Pilbara one, sorry? Yarra, sorry. So are they all sourced from, like, Northwest Shelf? Like, where's their gas coming from?
So Yarra are using Northwest Shelf, and Wesfarmers are using the Perth Basin gas.
Oh, okay, so that's down this way, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And then Orica, that's East Coast gas, is it?
Correct.
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
It is.
And so is any of that exported? That's all for internal Australian use, what the ammonia produced here?
A bit of the Yarra stuff is exported. I think Wesfarmers use more ammonia than they produce, so they actually are a net importer. But I think Yarra are the only net exporter.
Yeah, right. And I see they're talking about using it for coal, like as a substitute or replacing coal-fired power stations potentially. Is that that sort of rings the hydrogen hype as well? But is that also different on that sort of scale? How that might be applied?
Yeah, so basically that is something which is actually mandated by the Japanese and Korean governments. They're leading the charge on that, but it's also a theme in Southeast Asia, so in Malaysia and Thailand. And basically the idea is this. Japan has a relatively young coal-fired power station fleet. Quite a lot of it was built after the tsunami, and they're quite reliant. I mean, 30% of Japanese power is still produced by coal. And actually, one of the interesting things that you've seen in the, since the outbreak of conflict in the Middle East is that they've actually shifted to even greater percentage of coal-fired power generation. And what ammonia does, you don't really have to re-engineer your thermal power station very much. You essentially change some of the nozzles for the burners, and you can actually use ammonia as a blend in with the coal, and you have an immediate impact on reducing the CO2 emissions. So what it allows you to do is not have to rebuild all your generating capacity. You can use the stuff you've got already, but just tweak the fuel input to be able to lower emissions.
Yeah, interesting. Mate, you can tell I'm having fun because it's 20 odd minutes gone already, and we haven't even got into the project yet. I'll bring it up on the Prezzo here. So this is up near sort of Dampier. So Dampier is one of Rio Tinto's main iron ore ports up near Karratha. How long is it's the WAH2 project? How long has this been in the works for?
About 4 years. I mean, essentially, we identified the market and then literally did a filter of the entire country and said, okay, if you're going to build an ammonia project, where do you want to be? And because, we obviously wanted to mitigate costs and risk and all the rest of it. And that's why we chose this location. And essentially, the reason is, so that blue line is the Burrup to Bunbury gas pipeline, and it goes straight past our front door in the Maitland Strategic Industrial Area. So we're in a designated industrial site. That's also an infrastructure corridor that our CO2 pipeline and water and all the rest of it can go through. So we're just trying to piggyback off as much existing infrastructure as possible. But also there are two different CO2 sequestration projects up there, one belonging to Santos, the other one Woodside, and that's obviously a key part of the project as well. And there aren't that many places which have that kind of capacity for CCS.
So CCS, so that's carbon capture, is that right?
Correct.
And that's the key component to changing the cleanliness of what you're producing.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay, and probably just delve into that a little bit before we go on. Like, how reliable is it? Still an evolving industry, carbon capture, or is it pretty established now?
It is pretty established. There have been some horror stories and everybody references Gorgon and so on and so forth. But Santos have been operating Moomba really effectively for, a couple of years now. And, that's obviously Santos is one of our preferred partners for CCS. What makes the difference is what you are sequestering into. And where the challenges have been is where people are using things like, aquifers or, different geology underground. The joy about the projects up there is that they're depleted gas fields. So essentially, it's an underground balloon, which you're taking all the air out of, which is the natural gas, and you're putting air back into it, which is the CO2. And so, I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but it's so much easier than some of those other sequestration projects.
Gotcha. Okay, so in terms of your project, I see you need gas, you need water, you need the carbon capture. And okay, so gas, where is, I see like you haven't yet secured the long-term gas agreement. Like what's involved in securing one of the critical components for this?
Yeah, well, we do actually have a key terms agreement in place with Chevron, and that's for about 65% of our gas. We've got another gas agreement as well, which is under a confidentiality agreement. But between now and FID, which is scheduled for the end of the year, that gas contract gets turned into a binding agreement subject to FID.
Okay, it's sort of working in tandem. It's condition precedent that you're going to get this thing funded.
Absolutely. And one of the really good, helpful things in this company is we have some extremely experienced professionals in the team who have actually worked at Chevron and Woodside and so on in the past. And so they have great relationships with the people on the other side of the table.
Yeah. Okay. And the water agreement as well. Like is that as much of a key input as gas in the ammonia production process?
No, it isn't in blue. In green, it's critical and you need a
Yeah.
lot of water, but in blue, not so much. We
Yeah.
actually have a relatively closed system in terms of our water usage.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we've done is we've got an agreement with Watercorp where we actually upgrade one of their water treatment plants to take wastewater and make it fit for purpose for ourselves. So we're not using any additional, there's no additional draw on bores or surface water or anything like that. So obviously we're very environmentally focused, and that's one of the great solutions that we've come up with.
Yeah. Okay. So if we go to, I guess, the funding of this, you've got Lindy, who've been essentially, it sound like a build, own, operate that's going to be implemented. Can you take me through what's your sort of funding options and how you're looking to do this from a 80 mil market cap base?
There's 1.7 billion of funding, which a lot of people, there's sticker shock around that. I come from a banking background.
Yeah.
Most of the people who I talk to on the funding are kind of like, 1.7 billion Aussie. I don't know if I can be bothered to get out of bed for that. So coming back to your question though, at the end of the day, this is how projects get developed. So, as you rightly say, we've got an agreement with Lindy for feed engineering, and that sort of migrates into project delivery. One of the things that, if you look at a couple of the other blue ammonia projects which have been built in the States, for example, Woodside's Beaumont project, or the Blue Point project, which is being built by JERA and CF Industries. Lindy have gone in there and essentially built the front end on a build, own, operate basis. So they're responsible for the capex and indeed the operation and maintenance for that and other components of the project. So that immediately can have a significant effect in terms of cutting your capex down. The thing about this is, we've got long-term fixed price input prices. So our gas is fixed price, our CO2 is fixed price, our water is fixed price. Our customers, we sell to them on long-term offtake deals, like 15-year fixed price with CPI indexing. So our financiers understand exactly what the economics of this look like, and there's very low risk around that once you've got to FID. And then, essentially it makes it very, very financeable. So we're talking to, the obvious candidates like NAIF, EFA, JBIC, Japanese Bank for International Cooperation, because they're, there's a large Japanese component in this, and they're all subsidized financing, but also the big infrastructure funds. So the arms of, BlackRock, Blackstone, some of the Middle Eastern funds, so on and so forth, who actually participated in the Perdaman project nearby, are also, the kind of people who we would be talking to.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a private equity sort of style, isn't it? As you said, those fixed inputs, long life thing, because it doesn't have a mine life. It sounds like it's infrastructure industry things, like industrial things are infinite.
That's exactly right. Yep, it's an energy infrastructure play.
Yeah. Okay. So at the moment, NH3 own 100% of the project, effectively.
Correct.
Like undeveloped, obviously. So what is strategic stake is going to be a big component, and if so, like who's at the top of those lists? Does it depend on the application? Like if it's for marine energy, is it going to be the likes of your steel mills or whoever's shipping the iron ore? Like who are your likely partners, do you think?
So our funding partners are under the Itochu deal that we announced, there's already a contemplation of them participating in funding for that. So the overall concept is, obviously, we want to retain as much of it as possible, but we're going to have to raise some equity at the project level. So we're looking at something like a 70% debt, 10% mezzanine, 20% equity split. And so that 20% equity would be the sell down to those strategic partners.
Yeah, okay. So is NH3 looking to keep at a minimum, majority control and be the operator effectively?
So majority control. One of the aspects of the Linde agreement would be that they could have an O&M, so an operating and maintenance contract, but we own the gas contracts, we own the CO2 sequestration contracts, we own the customer contracts, so we own the business. But, at the end of the day, it's a lot easier to get in a world-class industrial gas company to operate, and that obviously lowers the risk and gives our financiers the comfort they're looking for.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess what are major shareholders looking for? Do they want to see you take on, a big amounts of debt, or would they rather see you sell down more of a stake to really de-risk the project? What's the sort of sense from the investment world? Because obviously you're wanting to bring investors on, but they're probably looking at that $1.7 billion number and they're thinking, oh, geez. But what's the tone at the moment?
So, I mean, what we've outlined in terms of that split of, 70% debt and then the mezz and equity is what the fund managers seem to like. And I think the retail guys, once they understand that, you don't have to raise $1.7 billion by issuing shares on the ASX, they get it. The thing about this is very predictable, stable cash flows. And so it is very financeable, which means that from an ASX equity point of view, you get great leverage in terms of the upside on the story. And then obviously we've been talking about phase one. We're already looking at, future phased build out for expansion as the market develops.
Yeah. So 1.7 billion, like where is a lot of that CapEx going into? Like what is this? Is it just the sheer scale of this? Like what are your biggest cost items?
So if you break down, we do actually have a schematic there. If you go down about, there you are, that's the one. So those are sort of the bits of the puzzle, if you want, and the jigsaw that you put together to build an ammonia plant. So those bits in red are owned by third parties. So that's, your gas supply from Chevron, your CO2 sequestration with Woodside. But the core parts of the actual plant are what's called the ATR, the autothermal reformation, which is basically splitting natural gas, CH4, into C and H, your hydrogen, and then your power gen. The air separator unit is basically sucking in air out of the atmosphere, splitting that out to get the nitrogen component, and then the CO2 compression, which goes off to sequestration. And then the last part of the main plant is that ammonia synthesis, which is basically putting together hydrogen and nitrogen to make ammonia. So those four boxes in yellow would be about half of the total CapEx.
Okay, gotcha. Now this flow sheet here, this process, is there anything unique about it, or is this tried and proven around the world?
We are super risk averse. This is very, very vanilla. We're using Topso technology. We're one of the biggest technology providers. Like I say, we're bringing in Linde for building and operating. We're keeping it super simple. So we're doing the bits that we're good at, and then we bring in partners to do the other parts of the project development.
Okay, so those bits in yellow, the bits that are the potential build, own, operate by Linde, does that take off the 1.7 billion capex?
Absolutely.
Okay,
yep.
And
that would half the number.
Okay, got it. Yeah, right. Okay, that sounds a bit better. I get that. And this is this is their jam. Like they're using this they're essentially using themselves as an energy private equity themselves.
Well, this is what they do. Like I say, if you looked at those other blue ammonia projects, Linde do exactly the same thing in those. And in fact, in the Perdaman urea project, which is also being built in the Burrup, Linde are doing the front end of that as well. Not on a BOO basis, but they are the world leaders in terms of this industrial gas production.
Okay, righty. So let's just assume all this goes to plan, which would be great for you. And you retain, hypothetically, you retain 70% of the project, and this thing is in operation. We come from the world of gold. I come from the world of gold mining. You want to know free cash flow. How much money does this thing make if everything's going well at today's prices?
So EBITDA is 260 million a year.
Yeah.
This throws off.
And
so
is that
so
at
it's
a
highly
70%?
cash generative.
Okay, what a percent? 260 mil a year, is that a 100% basis or?
That's on a 100% basis using a 60-40 debt equity
Yep.
ratio. So we've actually improved on that, and we used an 8% cost of debt in that as well. And actually, because we're looking at these policy financing groups like NAIF and JBIC, that would actually likely come in a bit cheaper than that as well.
So, and what's NAIF's interest in this sort of stuff? Like, who are you competing? Are you competing against a lot of the rare earth world for NAIF funding? Like, where are you on the pecking order, do you feel, with ammonia compared to where NAIF want to put their money?
Yeah, it's a good question. So as I mentioned, NAIF were a financier of Perdaman. So that's doing urea rather than ammonia. They're grey, not blue. So I would argue that we sort of have another tick in the box. Yeah. We actually just announced our public impact survey back on Friday, which shows tremendous public benefit, which is one of the criteria that NAIF look at in terms of job creation, tax revenue contribution, side jobs, and on top of that, obviously, there's the emissions reduction component as well.
Yeah. Okay. So when are you looking do you think that FID could potentially be announced with? I know that it sounds like there's a lot of ducks to get in a row with the funding and for everything to start flowing. What sort of, you're talking about 2029 production, but potentially FID this year. Is that still on track? What's your biggest hurdles?
Yeah, so FID at the end of this year. And, there is quite a lot to do between now and then, but having Lindy on board is really helpful on the engineering side. We have a preferred project status with the Western Australia government, which has actually helped tremendously in terms of the approvals work stream. And then we're working with the same advisors that Perdaman used on the financing as well. So again, we're just trying to keep it simple, use as much of the people who have invented the wheel already to try and streamline stuff.
Very good. Where is all that approvals and permitting up? Like, what are your permitting milestones still to achieve?
So we've done all the environmental surveys, and they haven't highlighted any issues, which is kind of to be expected because we are in a designated strategic industrial area, which is owned by Development WA. So there was obviously survey work done before us, and we're also using the designated infrastructure corridor. So all of the flora, fauna, all of that is done. And then obviously we have to engage in the heritage surveys as well and get that done. But working with DQ and the other departments in the WA government has been a lot easier than I had expected and anticipated, to be brutally honest. Yeah. I didn't think I'd be saying that.
Very, very good. Yeah, you got to say it on camera too. Now, just to close it off, I'm just trying to get my head around the future demand for this. Like, is a BHP RIO FMG? I think I might have asked before. Have they signalled already that they want to go down this road? For iron ore shipping is such a big part of their business, their social responsibility. Is this something they're looking at?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure that everybody has seen the leadership that Fortescue have done in terms of ammonia shipping. They have a ship called the Global Pioneer that goes around the world. It's an ammonia-powered vessel, demonstrating how what the future looks like. So they are a huge leader in this space. And at the end of the day, all of the mining companies need to reduce their emissions, not only at mine site, but also throughout their value chain. And this is a key way of doing it.
Yeah, okay. So it's going to be that trade-off again. Like, will that come in back in flavour, the emission reduction but higher cost? It's whether they bite the bullet. Do you feel that? Because it has died off a bit, I feel.
Absolutely. Yep.
But I guess for your project to happen, it sort of needs to come back a bit.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are a couple things. First of all, like I say, the IMO regulation that would actually make it, cost neutral between the two, and that's likely to get voted on in December of this year. So that basically takes away any disincentive, but they also have their other targets in terms of emissions that they've got to meet. So there's a push there. The other thing is that this is not only an emissions reduction story. This is an ammonia security story. So in terms of having regional production, this is really important to customers, not only for energy but also for all the other uses. And it is very, very hard to build a grey ammonia plant in Australia or lots of other countries these days without some kind of CO2 sequestration strategy. Yeah. And unless you've got a CCS project next door to you, which is pretty rare, it's very hard to build.
Yeah, okay. So, and it could also come from the agricultural side. If I assume 75% of ammonia used in Australia is for agriculture as well. So that's the positive lens. So if you're leaning towards more the marine fuel side, I assume that if they're shipping from Dampier and Port Hedland, which is bloody close to where you are, they're realistically not going to. Would they? Even if the Middle East or whatever's undercutting you on price of ammonia, they're most likely going to source from somewhere that's producing it right next to them.
Well, you're absolutely right. So what we didn't mention is we actually have a joint development agreement between ourselves, Pilbara Ports Authority, and Oceania Marine. So Pilbara Ports obviously own all of the Pilbara facilities that the iron ore comes out of. So we're working on producing a solution for 2030. The important thing is twofold. First of all, we are globally competitive on price for blue ammonia. So whether it's from the Middle East or the US, we're right in there. By the time you transport that ammonia from the Middle East or the US, you are adding. I mean, you're adding a premium of what about $100 from the US and $60 from the Middle East, something like that. Added to which, if you're using it for low emissions fuel, they actually count all the emissions in the transportation from the point of manufacture to the point of usage. So obviously our emissions for that is zero because we're right by the port, whereas they're having to add on all the carbon emissions for shipping the ammonia to the ports to refuel.
Yeah. Very interesting, mate. I've had a ripper. This has been awesome. All the things I'd never thought I'd talk about. Ammonia was one of them. Or you just use it to blow shit up.
Well, that's a good use as well.
But we don't want that happening in your industry at all, mate. Thanks so much for coming on, LEVRD. I've learned an absolute gutload, and I assume everyone else that's listened to it has as well. So, mate, it's on the watch list now. It wasn't before today. NH3.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Matty. I've enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, very good, mate. Best of luck with all the hurdles ahead, and we'll be keeping a keen eye on it. Cheers, mate.
Fantastic. Thank you.